You may have seen the headlines lately, lawsuits being filed against video game companies because children are becoming addicted to video games. And you may have seen videos like this explaining how a parent should handle a situation where they think their child is suffering from a video game addiction.
Dr. Paul Corkin, Mayo Clinic child psychiatrist, says it's normal for kids to want to play video games, but parents should pay attention to lines being crossed into addiction.
Playing the games all night long, abandoning things that used to be a source of great enjoyment, schoolwork, friendships, sports.
Dr. Corkin says gaming addiction can often be a sign of a broader mental health issue like anxiety or depression. He says there are 3 important things parents who think their child is addicted to gaming should do. Number 1, communication is key.
It's a time to get more involved in the teenager's life and try to open up more channels of communications and really get a handle on what's going on in their life.
Number 2, it's important for parents to establish rules about screen time and stick to them. If teenagers aren't meeting basic family expectations, Dr. Corkin says internet time and devices should be treated as a privilege. And number 3, don't be afraid to get them professional help. For the Mayo Clinic News Network, I'm Ian Roth.
I love the one mom in the video that is yelling at her kid and forcefully taking the remote from him to turn off the TV. Guess she skipped Mayo Clinic's first rule about healthy open communication. In this video, I want to look at what video game addiction is, the signs associated with it, and what the courts have done in an attempt to respond to this. And if you stick around until the end, I'll share some helpful remedies from clinicians, and not just the ones from the Mayo Clinic, on how to potentially overcome a video game addiction. The latest edition of the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or the DSM-5-TR, lists addiction into 2 categories. The first, substance addiction, such as opioids, methamphetamines, alcohol, marijuana, etc. And the second, behavioral addictions, but the only behavioral addiction that the DSM-5-TR lists is gambling addiction. The DSM-5-TR lists Internet Gaming Disorder, or IGD, in the section recommending conditions for further research, along with caffeine use disorder and other conditions. So what is IGD? The DSM-5 proposes that a person must have significant impairment or distress in multiple aspects of their life while displaying at least 5 of the following symptoms within a year. 1. Preoccupation with gaming. 2. Withdrawal symptoms when gaming is taken away are not possible, such as sadness, anxiety, irritability. Tolerance, or the need to spend more time gaming to satisfy the urge. Inability to reduce playing or unsuccessful attempts to quit playing. Giving up other activities or a loss of interest in previously enjoyed activities due to gaming. Continuing to game despite problems. Deceiving family members or others about the amount of time spent gaming. The use of gaming to relieve negative moods such as guilt or hopelessness, and risk, having jeopardized or lost a job or relationship due to gaming.
It's me or the PS5. Tell me which of us is more your type. Seems like you can't decide. So if it's not me, then I'm probably gonna run it over.
Yeah, I'll take the PS5 because they don't get in my car and tell me how I should drive. It ain't gonna fight me on where we eating when they can't decide. And it won't turn around and break my heart at 3:45 a.m. from in the bathroom at the party, yeah. To tell me I was just a hobby, yeah. I'm better off here in the lobby than your body, yeah.
The World Health Organization, or WHO, also has a definition for gaming addiction. It is included in the 11th revision of the International Classification of Diseases, or the ICD-11. It is defined in the ICD-11 as a pattern of gaming behavior, digital gaming, or video gaming characterized by impaired control over gaming, increasing priority given to gaming over other activities to the extent that gaming takes precedent over other activities and daily activities, and continuation or escalation of gaming despite the occurrence of negative consequences. Now, these 2 definitions are pretty much identical. And give us a clear picture as to what constitutes a gaming addiction. But what exactly is the cause of addiction? That may be the easiest question to answer in this video. Humans are biologically conditioned to seek rewards. When you eat a really good meal, for example, your body releases dopamine. Dopamine, for those unfamiliar, is a hormone and a type of neurotransmitter or chemical messenger made in your brain. Your nervous system uses it to send messages between nerve cells. These messages also travel between your brain and the rest of your body. When dopamine is released, you feel pleasure. Both substances and certain activities like sexual activity or spending money can release large amounts of dopamine in the brain. This natural chemical typically encourages behaviors essential for survival, such as eating, working, and spending time with others. However, these intense dopamine surges can impact thoughts, emotions, and behavior in harmful ways. When dopamine levels spike from substance or behaviors, they can drive a person to seek pleasure through these means rather than from healthier ones. Over time, this can alter brain chemistry, leading to desensitization. As a result, people may need larger amounts to experience the same effect. For some drugs, like opiates, the withdrawal symptoms are so severe that they can create a strong incentive to keep using. Several factors can increase the risk of addiction, including genetics. Research indicates that genetic factors contribute to 40 or 60% of the risk of a substance use disorder. People with a close relative, such as a sibling or a parent with an SUD, has an elevated risk. Scientists are investigating which specific genes may contribute to this vulnerability. Mental health conditions. There's a significant connection between addiction and mental health disorders such as depression, PTSD, and bipolar disorder. Roughly half of those who experience a mental health disorder will also face a substance use disorder, and vice versa. Environmental factors. Access to substances is a major environmental risk. Risk factors include substance use within one's household or peer group and the availability of medication that may be misused, such as opioids or stimulants. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, which are stressful or traumatic events in childhood, also play a major role. ACEs are strongly linked to an increased risk of addiction and other health issues throughout life. It's one of the only things Sigmund Freud actually got right.
And so you see, Clash, this is why everybody wants to have sex with their own parents.
Mr. Freud, sir? Yeah, you keep saying everybody wants to have sex with their parents, but, I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I just really don't want to do that at all.
The rise of video gaming and video game addiction raises some important questions like, who is responsible for these addictions? What are the laws regarding access to video games? And what can game publishers do to ensure that people are not being harmed by video games? These are questions that the courts have been asked to answer for years. One of my favorite court cases on this matter is Brown v. Entertainment Merchants Association, a 2010 Supreme Court case regarding a 2005 California law that would have banned the sale of violent video games to a minor without adult supervision. The Supreme Court upheld a lower court's decision that this law violated the First Amendment, as violent video games fit under freedom of speech just like any other form of art. I want to point to two very interesting lines of questioning brought up during oral argument.
Justice Sotomayor, cartoons do not depart from the established norms of a level of violence to which children have been historically exposed to. We believe the level of violence in these video games.
That same argument could have been made when movies first came out. They could have said, oh, we've had violence in Grimm's fairy tales, but we've never had it, live on the screen. I mean, every time there's a new technology, you can make that argument.
Well, Your Honor, I think that's the beauty of incorporating the three prongs of the Miller standard into California's law. This standard is very prophylactic and ensures that only a narrow category of material will be covered. Certainly not.
How is this any different than what we said we don't do in the First Amendment field in Stevens, where we said we don't look at a category of speech and decide that some of it has low value. We decide whether a category of speech has a historical tradition of being regulated. Now, other than some state statutes that you point to, some of which are very clearly the same as those that we struck down in Wynne, where's the tradition of regulating violence?
Your Honor, California submits that when the rights of minors are at issue and not the rights of adults, the standard should be more flexible. The Constitution should recognize that when the audience is minors, the same standard should not apply. Therefore, the question should not be whether or not historically violent speech was regulated, but whether or not the Constitution guarantees minors a right.
Could you get rid of rap music? Have you heard some of the lyrics of some of the rap music? Some of the original violent songs that have been sung about killing people and about other violence directed to them?
After being shut down, he continues to declare that violence in video games has a different effect on the mind than violence in any other art form. He asserts this even when Justice Sotomayor brings up rap music. Rap music had a huge battle in the late 90s and early 2000s, and these same arguments were used to censor these artists.
Mr. Morosini, could I take you back to Justice Scalia's original question, which was what counts as deviant violence or morbid violence? Because I read your briefs all the way through, and the only thing that I found was you said was clearly covered by the statute was Postal 2. But presumably the statute applies to more than one video game. So what else does it apply to? How many video games? What kind of video games? I mean, how would you describe in plain English what morbid violence is, what you have to see in a video game for it to be covered?
Okay, Justice Kagan, I would go back to the language of the statute. And the statute covers video games where the range of options available to the player includes maiming, killing, dismembering, torturing, sexually assaulting, and those types of violence. So I would look to games where...
So anything that has those kinds of violence counts?
No, and then we would move to the three prongs of the Miller standard, Your Honor. We would look to see...
Well, so how do we separate violent games that are covered from violent games just as violent that are not covered?
Well, Your Honor, I think a jury could be instructed with expert testimony, with video clips of gameplay, and to judge for themselves whether...
I'm not concerned about the jury judging. I'm concerned about the producer of the games who has to know what he has to do in order to comply with the law. And you're telling me, well, a jury can... Of course a jury can make up its mind, I'm sure. But a law that has criminal penalties has to be clear. And how is the manufacturer to know whether a particular violent game is covered or not?
Well, Your Honor, if we
He convene his own jury and try it before, I really wouldn't know what to do as a manufacturer.
Justice Scalia, I'm convinced that the video game industry will know what to do. They rate their video games every day on the basis of violence. They rate them for the intensity of the violence.
So is what's covered here the mature category in the ratings? Is that what the statute covers? Is that what it's meant to cover?
I believe that some mature-rated games would be covered, but not all.
Some, but not all.
But not all.
Okay, now this was the most nonsensical argument anyone could make. Justice Scalia is exactly right. You can't make laws that are purposely vague and just go, well, they'll know what to do because they classified their games already, even though some of the games they would classify as mature would be exempt from this law. It literally makes no sense, and I'm glad SCOTUS shut it down. The issue in this case, as has been the issue since the advent of violent video games, is that they cause children to act out violently. While everyone in 1999 was out blaming anyone but the actual shooters responsible for the Columbine school massacre, video games got swept in the blame game. But time and again, the courts have held firm on video games being protected under the First Amendment. But perhaps a new 2023 lawsuit aiming to blame the video game manufacturers for the cause of a young teen's video game addiction could look to change that. Plaintiff Cynthia Jimenez, who is the guardian of her 14-year-old grandchild, identified only as IC, sued companies including Epic Games, Roblox, Microsoft, Google, and Nintendo in East St. Louis federal court last fall. Seeking unspecified compensatory and punitive damages, she alleges the defendants' intentional, negligent, deceptive, fraudulent, willful, immoral, reckless, and unlawful acts cause IC to become addicted to video games. That is the full quote. Somebody's mad. That's all I gotta say. Like, why would you say all of that? That's crazy, dude. They're gonna think you're crazy. Like, oh my God, you don't have to use that many words. We get it. We get it. You don't like what they did. That's why you're suing them. Like, you don't have to. It was unlawful. It was irresponsible. It was arrogant. It was demeaning. Like, dude, stop. You pull out a fucking thesaurus before you wrote your complaint? That's all I'm thinking. You're like, have thesaurus.com synonyms for, like, what are you doing? That's too much. That's too much. As a result of this gaming addiction, IC allegedly requires treatment that includes medication therapy, outpatient counseling, and an individualized education plan at school. Which, I mean, on its surface, it's easy to look at that and go, oh yeah, that's probably a case of IGD. If you need medication and remedial classes at school to help you with your video game obsession, you probably have an addiction. Well, that's if Cynthia Jimenez was telling the truth. Epic Games, a defendant in the case, looked into little IC's time on Fortnite, a claim Cynthia made that IC was playing uncontrollably for up to 35 hours a week. My full-time job is 35 hours a week. Like, what? That's crazy, dude. I work 35 hours a week. I couldn't imagine playing Fortnite for 35 hours a week. But he's a kid. But also, he's in school. Or she. They're in school. How are they playing Fortnite 35 hours a week when they're in school for 40 hours a week? That's crazy. That's dedication. That's dedication to the craft. I don't think anyone with a job or who's in school full time has enough spare time to play video games. Play one game, play Fortnite for 35 hours a week. That's like ninja numbers, bro. Like, Ninja plays Fortnite 35 hours a week, but that's his job, or at least he used to be. I don't know what he does now. But, like, you know, not IC. Anyway, Epic Games found that the account IC was allegedly using to play Fortnite on had been created just 3 days before the lawsuit was filed. The account had recorded an hour of gameplay, and in the preceding 4 months to Epic Games making a motion to dismiss, hadn't been touched. Quote, "The false premise that IC continues to play Fortnite uncontrollably is the basis for all claims against Epic," end quote. Outside counsel Moaz Kaba wrote in a motion for sanctions asking U.S. District Attorney Stephen McGlenn to dismiss the case and award Epic legal fees. In quote, "An alleged addiction requires more than a single brief instant of gameplay," end quote. Plaintiffs' lawyers responded in court papers that IC, quote, "played Fortnite compulsively and addictively from 2017 to 2020, end quote, on other identified accounts, and that Jimenez, quote, "can testify to personally witnessing IC's compulsive and addictive use of Fortnite," end quote. But a week before the sanction hearing set for June 21st, the court granted the lawyers' joint request to dismiss the suit against Epic with prejudice. Plaintiffs' lawyers also withdrew their claims against the other defendants with leave to refile. In layman's terms, their case was so thin against Epic Games that they were barred from ever suing them again for this matter. I imagine they were so worried about their razor-thin case against the other companies, so they withdrew the lawsuit to avoid the other cases being dismissed with prejudice. But that's just my opinion. I have no facts to back that up. That is just my opinion. Cynthia Jimenez is a liar, allegedly. I'm not trying to get sued for defamation, okay? While the courts have yet to make a ruling on what role the game manufacturers have on people developing gaming addictions, the argument has been made that the manufacturers simply act as distributors and can't be held responsible for something that they didn't make. That still begs the question as to whether or not the game developers can be held responsible. There's a reason every casino or sportsbook ad is required to have disclaimers about gambling addiction. Could the video game industry be next? While there's still a lot of research to be done in this field, there's still a lot of ways that one person can seek help for themselves or a child to potentially overcome a potential video game addiction. I Googled how to overcome a video game addiction, and it recommended I call or text 988, which for those of you living outside the U.S. is the number for the suicide hotline. So that was interesting. The Cleveland Clinic says that talk therapy is the main treatment for video game addiction. Talking out your addiction with a therapist or in a support group seems to be the most effective method for overcoming a video game addiction. I will list resources below for those living in the United States on how to seek support. I'm curious what you guys think. Should video game companies be held responsible for video game addiction? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and hit that subscribe button and tick that notification bell so you don't miss my future videos. Until next time, bye.